In this tutorial, I'm going to go over drag and drop that is available in the WIDI library. Now, this is not a exhaustive documentive explanation of how drag and drop works, but it should be enough to get you started. So if you look at the illustration that I have in Firefox, and basically it's just an image that I created in Microsoft Publisher, you can see we have a source and a destination. So if you think of drag and drop, and you've probably seen examples of it on the web, you have a source HTML tag or HTML control and destination. And in terms of WIDI, in the widget world, we have a source widget and we have a destination widget. And basically you have to be able to know what needs to be set from what class to enable drag and drop functionality in the WIDI library. So as you can see from the illustration that I have, we have the WIDI InteractiveWidget, which has a set draggable method, and in the destination class we have the WIDI widget, and it has a accept drops method and a drop event method. Now let's go ahead and look at the source. Our source control is widget is the widget that is going to be dragged over to its destination, and we need to be able to set a method that enables it to be draggable. So basically we look at the WIDI InteractiveWidget. Now I have to admit, when I first saw this and I saw the example that was available in the WIDI library, I didn't understand all that was going on behind the scenes. I mean, let's be honest. But once you look at the example and figure out what methods are used, it becomes pretty easy. It kind of makes sense. So we have to look at the WIDI InteractiveWidget that enables this widget, this source widget, to become draggable over to the destination. You see that. It enables this widget to be able to be draggable over to its destination. And if we look at, let's go to the documentation. Let me see if I can pull that up. Let's see here. Okay, I have the documentation open. Let's go to set draggable. And this is the interact widget. I should say interact widget. I keep saying interactive widget. It's the WIDI interact widget. And basically we have a couple of arguments that goes into this method. And basically what it is saying is it configures, well, they say configure dragging for drag and drop, but basically it enables drag and drop for this widget. The only one that really concerns us for this tutorial, and I don't know if I'm going to go into real in depth on these others, but the only one that's really of concern is the MIND type. You can think of the MIND type as the key that enables the source and the destination to communicate with each other to enable the drag and drop operation to complete. If you define just the MIND type for the set draggable, and let me get rid of this. Okay, if you go ahead and define the MIND type for set draggable, that sets a key for the source. And when we look at the accept drops, that also takes a MIND type for the destination. And if you set the MIND type for the destination says, okay, I'll accept any widget that has that MIND type. So that's why we set the MIND type in set draggable, because it's kind of a key that says, okay, I can be dragged to this destination and only to this destination. If you want to talk about these other three arguments, I'll talk about these two. This happens to be where you define another widget, for example, an image. We haven't really covered images yet, but if you define an image using the WIDI library, and then we set the isDrag widget only to true, and going back to our illustration, when you start the drag operation, that image will be the image that'll be right here. As you can see where the mouse pointer is. It'll actually be, when you start your drag operation, it'll change to that image or to that control up until you go to the destination. So that's basically all that is doing, is saying, okay, when I start the drag operation, change the widget to that widget when we're doing the drag. So in our case, a good example would be an image. And if you look at the drag and drop example in the Witty library, they have I think it's a thumbnail, a small thumbnail, and a large image. The large image is like a pill for the main widget, and then when you start the drag operation, it changes to that thumbnail, a smaller image, and it stays that way until you get to the destination. So that's all that is happening when you set the widget and is drag widget only, and we'll ignore this last one. But basically the only one we're really concerned about is the mine type, because it's kind of like a key. And then looking at this last little bit, of course, you wouldn't really expect for drag and drop to work if JavaScript is disabled, because really behind the scenes all this is JavaScript. Both of these. You know, if you can do a drag and drop operation in JavaScript, that is what enables you to do it in the Witty library. So as you can see, we call set draggable and set the mine type, and says, okay, this is my key. Let's keep it like that. This is my key. And then if we look at accept drops in the Witty widget, let's go back to the home. Let's go back home. Let's look up Witty widget. Well, let's do accept drops. Accept drops basically is saying, it's saying this widget can accept widgets that are able to be draggable. I mean, if you just look at the name, it's saying I can accept drops. And then if you look at the, let's go back to the definition. Of course, like I just said, it has a mine type. So basically it's saying, if you define this mine type, those are the types that this destination widget can accept. So I hope I'm making that very clear. You define a mine type in set draggable, you define a mine type in accept drops, and the destination widget says I'll only accept widgets that have that mine type, and it could be multiple mine types, and you'll see that as we start coding. And then for the second argument, which is set to a default of a Witty string, you can define a hover class that happens when you're doing, once you do the actual dropping onto the widget. But again, I'm going to ignore that. I just want you to see what actually is going on using the basics. And then the last thing we want to look at is the drop event, which basically says, what do we want to happen once the drop takes place? It could be once we drop a widget from one widget to another, drop a widget on top of another, we could do a plethora of things. It depends on your imagination as a programmer. We can increment a variable, an integer. We could update a database. We could change the layout of the screen, change the user interface. It just depends on what you, the programmer, wants to happen. And if we do a search, drop event, and I have to be honest with you, when I first looked at this, I had to actually look at an example from the Qt library, because of course this is what this is inspired from. And basically it says handles a drop event, because I looked at Qt because this isn't a very in-depth explanation, but once you look at Qt, it's not exactly implemented the same, but you'll get the general idea. Once you implement this, the drop event, you can actually get information from the widget that is being dropped. So once you drop this control, you can get information from this source file, and they could be from two different widgets that have nothing in common, but you can get information about those widgets. You can get the text from it. You can get his parent, which you'll see in our example. You could get whatever other data is in that widget and then do your processing. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And basically, once you define set draggable, accept drops, and drop event on 2 different widgets, you're basically done. So if we go ahead, let's go ahead and start looking at some code so you can see what's really going on. Now, if we look at the Komodo Edit project, and I'll put another disclaimer. This is going to be a quite lengthy tutorial on how to get this implemented. But once you see it, it's really not that complicated once it's up and running. So the first thing we want to do is we have our main.cpp file like we always do. But now we have to make some changes to the project. So let's go to our CMake list file, and we need to add a directory, one we have not used in our tutorials. We need to add the classes directory that is already part of our project, because we're going to add a header and a source file to it. Because looking at this illustration, when we implement the accept drops and the drop event, we're going to subclass a WIDI container widget. I haven't really gone over subclassing using C++ and WIDI in a whole lot, in depth. But this will be like our first example on how to actually do a subclass, just to show you how to use drag and drop in WIDI. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to set a variable in our CMake list file, and we're going to call it classes. And the next thing we want to do is actually get the source directory. Now the source directory, looking at this in Komodo Edit, is all of this. This is the source directory that houses our build folder, product folder, source folder, and our 2 files here. In order to do that, if you look at the scheme that we already have set up so far, we call the CMake source directory. If you look at this is the source directory, and this is the GCC directory in our source directory. You can see that we have GCC, and that's in the source directory, and then this is the actual source directory itself. And so what we want to do again is get the source directory, and let me do a slash. So now we're in the source directory, which is the directory we've used in all our tutorials so far. All of this is the source directory. And then we want to go down another level and add the classes directory. So now we're in the classes directory, which does not have anything right now. So once that variable is defined, we want to add it to our includes directory so that the compiler can actually see this directory. So this is how you actually add the variable to our includes directory command. Here's classes, and then this is how you actually define it. You just take the name of the variable itself, put it in curly braces, and add a $sign at the very beginning. And then the last thing we want to do is go to the file command and add the sources. This adds the headers, so you can see the header files in the include directory. Now we need to add the sources that are in that directory. So again, we go to the project directory, the CMake source directory, and then we go to the sources directory, and then we set a wildcard. Well, I'll take that back. Then we go to the classes directory, and then we set a wildcard. It says we want to see every source file that ends in .cpp. Now you could do any extension you desire. It could be .c, .cpp, it could be .text. It just depends on what you, the programmer, are comfortable with when you're doing your C++ project. In our case, I just want to use .cpp because that's going to be our source file. And as you can see, we have that right here. Because in order for your project to be seen, or your main.cpp file to be seen, you have to tell it right here. This is the source directory, or the project directory, source directory.cpp. We only have one .cpp file, our main file. So once you've done that, you've set classes, you've added that variable of that directory to the includes directory command, and then you've added source files using this wildcard to the file command. Now you can close your CMake list file. You can run CMake. We haven't done that in a while. That's already been run. That's why it went so quick, but we went ahead and ran it again. And that's been updated. Now we can start doing the actual coding. So the first thing I want to do, see if I can bring this up. Is we're going to create two files. And again, this is going to take a while. I'm going to inherit from the WIDI container widget, and I'm going to call it custom container widget. I'm not going to give it a .h extension. You could do that if you want to. For me, it's not really necessary. And then I'm also going to create another file called the same thing, custom container widget.cpp, and there's the source file. And again, all this is going to be is a WIDI container widget. We're just going to inherit from it. So if we do that, and then we have our main.cpp file, and the first thing after that we want to do is I'm going to add a WIDI border. Let's go ahead and get started to see what this is going to look like. Because I want to create a border around two container widgets. One of them is going to be a standard WIDI container widget. Another one is going to be this custom container widget. Excuse me. Now, the first thing we want to do is we have our WIDI container widget. We're going to add it to our application root. Then I'm going to do a break and add that to the application root. And then I'm not going to actually add, we need to add a new container widget. But we're not going to do that yet. I'm just going to comment it out, custom container widget. And I'm going to call that box 2. But we will get to that. And then I need to create 4 WIDI text widgets. We're not going to create them dynamically. I actually need for them to be their own object. I'm just going to call them child1. And first off, I'm just going to create some paragraph tags. I'm going to close that out. Then I'm going to give it a style. And we're going to use some CSS here. I'm just going to give it a, for my purposes, it may be different on your screen. You might have to make the text bigger or smaller. I'm going to give it an emphasis of 1.5. And then I'm going to just say row 1. So now we have a text widget. I'm going to do a copy. 2, 3, 4. I'm going to do 4 of these. So we have child 1, child 2, child 3, child 4. And then going to take our box 1 and give it a decoration style. And we're going to set the border. And I'll explain this in 1 second. Okay, we set the border. I've created it dynamically. Of course, it's a value class, so you don't need to do new border. Basically, I've created our border. We've given it a value of solid. It's going to be thick, and the border color is going to be black. Then the next thing we want to do is to resize. We're going to resize this widget. Now you could do this a plethora of different ways. You can do it like this. But I'm going to show you a different way. I've done it like this in the past. I'm going to call width length 320 pixels. There's the unit. And I'm going to call this it's going to be 240 pixels for the height. And then that's going to be the size of that widget. And the last thing we want to do is add our child widgets. Okay. We have child 1, I'm going to do child 2, child 3, and child 4. Okay, once we've done that, now we need to actually do the children. And here's where it gets interesting. We want the children to be draggable. So we want to be able to drag these from the source, which is going to be the box 1. The box 1 is our source container, to a new container. So all we're going to do is call set draggable. And if you remember, the arguments are going to be the MIME type, and it could be another widget, and you want to say, do you want to use that widget, which could be true or false. In this case, we're just going to do the MIME type. In this case, I'm just going to call our MIME type witty text. It could be, the MIME type could be any MIME type that you desire. It could be an established MIME type that's already available on the web. In our case, I'm just going to call it witty text. And once we've set it to draggable, I'm going to just do some decoration here, decoration style. And actually, I'm not going to do all this. What I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do child 1. Okay. Alright, that sets the border, but we don't want to actually set the border. I'm going to set background. I'm going to set the background color and set the foreground color, which is the text color. Okay, once we've done that, I'm going to get rid of this. Get rid of this. I'm trying not to make this too hard. Okay, and as you can see, that sets the background color. I'm going to copy this. Let's get rid of all of this. So now we have background color is black and the foreground color black. We're going to change that. We're going to change the background color to blue and change the foreground color to white. So you have a blue background with white text. And basically all I'm going to do is what I've done before. Do a copy. That's child 1, child 2, 3, and 4. And just change this to 2. Alright, and we're going to change this one to a red background with white text. I'm going to change this to a green background, and with black text. Actually, you could keep, you really would not even need this because the default is black, but I'll just keep it as is and change the background color here to yellow and the text to black. And so far, that's all we're going to do right now, because we actually have to create this custom container widget. So if we go ahead and do a compile, hopefully we haven't made any mistakes. And apparently we have. Let's see. Witty text, witty text. Okay, I need to actually define witty text. Alright, let's see what happens. Let's do a compile. It's looking good. Not getting any errors. Alright, it compiled. Let's run the server. And of course, I've already run this program. That's why it came up so quick. Let's see. If we do F11. Localhost. Actually, I want to show something else. Actually, I'm not even going to use that. Let's use a feature that's already available to us in Komodo Edit. Let's get rid of that. Let's close that. If we go to the preview buffer and browser icon in Komodo Edit, let's go in Komodo tab, and this did not pop up on this side. You'll get a dialog box that tells you to preview your file. In our case, we want to go to localhost port 9090. I'm not going to remember the selection. You just click on preview, and I'm going to close the bottom pane. I'm going to bring this up. And as you can see, we can drag the control. I actually need to change the row numbers. But as you can see, these are draggable so far. And this is all because, this isn't really anything new that we've done so far. We've just created a box, container widget. We have a break tag that's there because we want to separate these two. And then we created 4 children. And they each have a style, with the text font being 1.5 for the emphasis. And actually, let's change this from row 1 to row 2, row 3, row 4. This should give you a general idea what's going on. And then all we did was we set some decoration style, set some decoration styles, some CSS styles. We set the border. We resized the widget to 320 by 240 pixels. We added the children to the box, and then all we did was style the children and set all of them to draggable. Remember, you have to use that set draggable to make the widgets draggable. So up to this point, and this is Komodo Edit, and I think Komodo Edit uses Internet Explorer behind the scenes, but once you set these to draggable, you can pretty much drag them, and you can see why I made them different colors. This isn't visually perfect, but you can see, once you do that, you can just drag these around. And now I'm going to show you how you can drag it from one container to another container. And then once we drag all of these to another container, make this container that's now empty disappear. So what we want to do first is go to our custom container widget. And again, I'm going to do some copy and pasting. And if we do a paste, and you can define these any way you can call these whatever you want. I just call these custom container widget. And here's the name of the class, a couple of comments, the date, my name with my copyright information. What you can do is we're going to do a couple of copy and paste again. I'm not going to copy and paste all of this just to get rid of stuff we really don't need. So now you have a container widget and a witty text widget. We're going to subclass the witty container widget. Let's see. And so it's going to have public, it's going to have a scope of public, and we're going to inherit from witty container widget. And here's, we're going to make that public. We're going to define the constructor, or not actually define it, but give the prototype. Alright, custom container widget. And notice what we're doing right here. You can see we have the we have the constructor, and if we bring up the documentation, I want to make sure that we understand what is going on. If we do a search, witty container widget, as you can see, this is the default constructor, and it takes a witty container widget itself as its parent. And because the witty container widget inherits from witty widget, it also inherits from WInteractiveWidget. But because it inherits from witty widget, if we scroll down and look at the documentation and do a search, next it's not showing up here. Let's see. Say that's interesting. It's not on the actual page where it inherits it, but it actually does. But as you can see from the diagram, you see that it inherits from witty widget. So if we go to drop event, I see why they only implement it in there. You actually have to implement it yourself. You can see it inherits from witty widget, and then you can go in here and actually implement your own version. So as you can see, we have our constructor, we have the drop event, which again basically is saying, what do you want to happen? You as the programmer, what do you want to happen once the drag event is complete? Do you want to update a database? Do you want to increment a variable? Do you want the user interface to change? So that is the header file. Basically, we inherit it from the container widget. We have the constructor that we need to implement and the drop event which we need to implement. And we just added two header files, the WIDI container widget and the WIDI text. That's all we need. That's how simple this is going to be. And then if we look at the implementation, again, I'm going to do some copy and pasting. And if we do a paste, and this is to save a little bit of time. If you see, we have some comments, same comments. We've included our header file. And for my setup, I don't need to actually do it in quotes, so I do it in brackets. But as you can see, we have the custom container widget. Here's the constructor. Here's the parent. It inherits from WIDI container widget, so we call it. And here's the parent variable. And then we also need to do our drop event. Again, I'm going to do some copy and pasting. If you know anything about programming, you'll be doing that a lot. And as you can see, here is our drop event. And that's basically it. Once you implement the constructor and the drop event, you're done. So the first thing we want to do is I want to call accept drops, because we're saying this container is going to accept widgets that are going to be dropped onto it. So we have to call this and tell it that it can accept drops. And remember, from the definition, accept drops. Again, let's see if we can go to the definition. Go home. Go to accept drops. We set a MIME type. Again, remember, the MIME type is kind of like a key. Let's see. Remember, you have to set the MIME type and set draggable for our source control, which we did that. And we're going to have to set it in the destination. And the destination, which is our custom container widget, can only accept widgets that have that MIME type that we implement in our constructor. So if we go back here, remember the MIME type that we did here. Of course, it would actually be vice versa. This one really controls. It'll only accept MIME types of this type that we define here. And then what we had to do was say, okay, this one has a MIME type of WIDI text in our example. It could be anything. It could be Bob. It could be, it could be my name, or anything that for your organization or for your personal project. So in our case, we define the MIME type as WIDI text. We keep the hover style class as a default. Nothing's really going to happen. And then I just do this, even though it's already the default for our WIDI widget container. Just going to set the inline defaults. You can really ignore that. And then the next thing we want to do is actually the drop event. Here's where things get interesting. Again, I'm going to keep on repeating this. This is where you want to define what you want to happen once you drop the container from the source to the destination. And again, I had to find this out from Qt. So the first thing we want to do is do an if statement. So we're going to say if event dot MIME type, and I'll show you where I got that from, is equal to WIDI text, because again, it can only take that type. What do we want to happen? So if the MIME type is equal to WIDI text, what do we want to happen? So again, if we go back to the documentation, and if we look up WIDI drop event, because that is what is being passed in, and it's by value. If we look at the definition of it, look at it. We have a WIDI source, the mine type and the mouse event. We don't really care about the mouse events, even though you could actually say, okay, what do we want to do with the mouse event that happens once we drag the control over? We can also figure what do we, we're in this example, we're actually using the mine type. This, it returns the mine type of the drop event. It's real simple. Basically, we're saying if the mine type of the widget that's being dropped is equal to witty text, so if the source widget has a mine type of witty text, what do we want to do with it? And that's how you get that information right here. And then the source, and notice how I'm going from bottom to top. The source is the actual widget that is being dropped. Even though it says a witty object, remember all witty widgets inherit from witty objects. So we're going to have to do a cast. And that's basically, again, that's basically the actual widget that is being dropped onto the witty container widget. So once we have the mine type, and it's equal to witty text, what do we want to do with it? Well, for this example, I'm going to create a witty text. And I guess that would be, I actually did that wrong. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call this child, because it kind of makes more sense. Because we're taking the children from the source and we're dropping them onto the destination. So we want to actually get the child witty text widgets from the source and actually do something with them. So I'm going to do a static cast. Now you could do a dynamic cast, but I'm going to do a static cast because basically this is telling you, you know what you're doing. You know if this is not right, it's going to give you an error message. And if you look at this, you can see we did a cast from a witty object because this is what source is. We call it event.source, which is that witty object, which is the actual control that is being dropped, and we're casting it to a witty text. And basically I call it child because that's exactly what you just get access to, the actual child widget that is being dropped. So if we look at this example, even though we don't have a box here, this child widget is actually this. This box. So once we drag it, this is what is being referenced. Let's see if I can go back to that. And then once we do that, once we have the child object, what I also want to do is get the parent. Again, let's go back to our documentation. If we look at parent, if you just do a search for parent in the witty widget library, click on widget parent, this returns the parent widget. Every witty object has this. So if you actually want to get the actual parent of the child control, you can get that information, and we need that to be able to figure out when do we need to make the source control disappear. So we're going to call witty container widget because that's what the source control is. I'm just going to call it parent. I'm going to do another static cast. Again, we're going to cast it to a witty container widget. And we're going to say child. And we're going to call parent because we can get access to the parent. So now we have access to the parent class, or the parent object. And then the next thing we want to do is add the widget to our container. So once you drag it from the source, it'll be added to the destination. And you can do a plethora of things. You don't necessarily have to add the child. You could say, okay, when I drag this over onto this control, let me see if I can bring this back up. Let's bring up Firefox again. We could say once we drag this over to this destination, a plethora of things could happen. It could be where we don't want to add the actual children. We want something else to happen. That's the beauty of this. You could update a database. You could change the user interface another type of way. You know, you could do some fancy animation once you add, you know, once this is complete. So this is totally up to you. In our case, we're just going to add a child widget to the destination control. And then once we've done that, and as you can see, we've called add a widget because, you know, when you call add a widget, it adds it to the control itself. We're going to do a if condition again and say if parent count, and all this is saying is how many children are left inside of the parent control. And we're saying if it's equal to 0, and you'll see what this means once we run the demo. If the parent count of the number of children is 0, hide the control. And there's a hide method. You can actually hide controls in WIDI. And once you've done that, you're done. That's it. So this is what we want to happen once the drop event is finished. We check for the MIND type. Excuse me. We get the actual child. We get the parent. We add the child to the WIDI container widget, our custom container widget, and then we check to see how many children are left. And once the children is 0, hide that container. So if we go ahead, go back over here, that's done, that's done. If we go back here, get rid of that. Going to include our custom container widget. And just as a refresher, remember it's in our classes folder. We've added that because of CMake. And once we do that, we have our box 2. And then the last thing we want to do is we're going to do box 2. Just going to do some decoration styling. That set border. And we're going to do WIDI border. We're going to make it solid. It's going to be thick. And it's going to have a color of black for the border. And we're just going to resize it. And what I'm going to do is, instead of me doing all of that, let me just do copy and paste. It's going to be the same. It's going to have the same dimensions as box 1. So that's basically it. We have our box 2. We've set the decoration style on it. We've resized it. And it's already set up to do the functionality that we need. It can accept drops. The drop event has been implemented. It takes a child. We get access to the parent. We add the child. And then we hide the control once all the children are set to 0. So if we do a compile, and we're going to do stop the server, and I can see we already have errors. Let's see what's going on. Oh, I see. That makes sense. I'm so used to doing the W. Let's see. There we go. If we do a compile, let's see, I already know. Let's see if we can, let's clean the project, and that gets rid of all your files in your build folder. And then let's run CMake again, and let's do a clean compile. Alright, and as you can see, that has compiled. The server is running. So if we go back here, let's close that. It just tells you that it's been executed and compiled 100%. Let's close that. Let's close the bottom pane, close the left pane. Let's do a refresh. I want to make this full screen. And as you can see, now we have the WInteractiveWidget container widget with the children of different colors. And we also have the custom container that can accept widgets that are draggable, and they have to have the same MIME type. This has a MIME type of WText, WIDIText, and this one says I can take widgets that have that MIME type of WIDIText. So if we go like this, if we go like this, we do row 1, we do row 2, you can see the animation is not smooth, but you can see, and then once we do that, it hides the other container. So if we go back here, let's get rid of full screen, do a refresh, start all over again. I'm going to go back to full screen again. As you can see, we have this, and it really doesn't matter on the order. And you can see, now you can see some ideas that you can come up with. You know, you could be any kind of data you can think of that you want to drag from one point to another point. You know, you could rearrange your entire website this way. And again, this is the beauty of using the WIDI library, using C++. Yes, we know behind the scenes is JavaScript, but think how easy this is once you understand the mechanics of what's going on behind the scenes. You know, you set your containers or your widgets, and it doesn't have to be just WIDIText. This is just what we've been using so far. You know, you set up your container widgets. You can create a custom container widget or any control that you so desire. You know, add some children to it and then just drag and drop. You know, you have to call set draggable for all of them and set the MIME type. And once you've done that, you define what you want to happen in the constructor of the other control, what MIME types you want it to accept. It doesn't just have to be one. And then you could say in the drop event, okay, do this. You look at the WIDI widget, or if you look at the WIDI library example, they take images and drop them onto a control, and it increments a variable that's displayed onto the screen. So it just depends on your imagination as the programmer. I hope you enjoyed that explanation. I know this is one of my longer videos, but again, I wanted to get the point across. You know, I have to be honest, I didn't know how this worked at first, but this just gives you some ideas of what is possible with the WIDI library. I will see you in the next tutorial. Have a good day.